My husband left me for a 25-year-old woman, but when I accidentally sent a joke text to the wrong person, he hit me and fought for my kids. But I documented everything, and the judge left them speechless. I'm 42 years old. I work at an accounting firm, and about a year and a half ago, my husband of 10 years left me for a 25-year-old woman. Yes, you read that right, a woman. What surprises me the most still isn't so much that, but how I handled the whole situation. Because honestly, I thought I was going to fall apart, but it turns out I'm much stronger than I thought. Or maybe I was just so tired of everything that when it finally happened, I felt more relief than anything else. I don't know. The thing is, I have two sons, Lucas, who's 12, and Caleb, who's 11, and what started as a casual divorce announcement ended up being a horrible custody battle that basically consumed my entire life for months. I guess I should start from the beginning so you understand how we got here. Andrew and I met when I was like 30. He was 33. And it was one of those relationships that just flows, you know, without much drama at first. We got married 2 years later. We adopted Lucas when he was 2 and Caleb when he was 1. And for a while, things were pretty good. Or at least that's what I thought. We lived in a nice house in the suburbs, we had stable jobs, the kids were doing well. Like the perfect life on paper. But looking back now, I realized that Andrew was always a bit manipulative. I just didn't see it because I was too busy working and raising the kids. He worked in marketing, made good money, but there was always something with his attitude, like the world owed him something. And when things didn't go the way he wanted, he'd get moody for days. And I'd end up being the one who had to fix everything, calm the waters, make sure the kids didn't bother him when he was like that. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in April last year. I was getting ready for a work event. I had to be there at 9 in the morning, and Andrew came into the bedroom while I was putting on my tie and said, "I need to talk to you about something important." I thought it was going to be something about the kids or finances, but no. He sat on the bed and literally said, "I'm moving out. I met someone and I think this isn't working between us anymore." Just like that, like he was commenting on the weather. I stood there with my tie half on thinking, is this really happening right now? Right when I have to leave? And I asked him who this person was, and he said, "Her name is Jessica. She's 25 years old. I met her at a work event like 3 months ago." He said nothing physical had happened yet, but that they had a strong emotional connection and that he was going to move in with her. The truth is, I didn't feel what I thought I would feel. I mean, yeah, I was surprised, but I also felt this weird wave of relief, like when you finally admit that something that's been wrong for a long time finally ended. I told him, "Okay, if that's what you want to do, go ahead." He expected me to scream or cry or beg him to stay. Basically, he wanted drama, but I just finished putting on my tie and grabbed my keys. I told him we could talk about the details that night when I got back from work, and I left. On the way to the event, I called my friend Richard, who works with me, to tell him what had just happened. Richard was like, "What? Are you okay? Do you need me to come get you?" And I told him no. Honestly, I'm surprisingly calm. I think I just needed this to happen. We talked for a while longer, and when I hung up, I thought about sending him a text message, joking about the situation. Like to process everything with humor because that's how I am. So I wrote him something like, "Haha, well, I officially just got dumped for a 25-year-old girl. I think this is a new record for me. But here comes the part where everything gets ridiculous." I sent the message to Andrew instead of Richard. I didn't realize until I saw the 3 dots that he was typing a response, and I thought, wait, why is Richard taking so long to respond? And then I saw that I had sent the message to the wrong chat. Andrew responded like, 5 minutes later, "Do you think this is funny? Is this a game to you?" And I explained to him that it was a mistake, that the message was for Richard. But it was too late. He got furious. When I got home that night, like around 7, Andrew was waiting for me in the living room, and he was like, possessed. He started yelling at me that I was insensitive, that how could I be so calm? That obviously I never cared about our relationship, if I could joke about it like that. I tried to calm him down. I told him it was just my way of processing things, that it didn't mean I didn't care, but he didn't want to listen. Then he said something that left me frozen. He said, "You know what? I'm not leaving. If you don't care, then I'm not moving either. We're going to live here together until I find something better. And you're going to have to see me every day. And I thought, this can't be happening. You literally just told me you're leaving for another person and now you're staying because I didn't react the way you wanted. The next few weeks were horrible. Basically, we lived in the same house, but we didn't talk unless it was absolutely necessary. Andrew would go out with Jessica like nothing. Sometimes he wouldn't come home to sleep, and I'd stay with the kids trying to act like everything was normal. Lucas started asking questions. Like, Dad, why doesn't Papa Andrew sleep here some nights anymore? And I didn't know what to tell him. I didn't want to lie to him, but I also didn't want to put all that adult information in his head. So I just told him that Dad was very busy with work. Caleb was younger and didn't ask as much, but I knew he was also noticing that something weird was happening. One day, I think it was like 3 weeks after all this, Andrew and I had an argument about who was going to pay which bill. And he was being completely irrational, saying that I should pay more because he was spending money on his relationship with Jessica. I told him that didn't make sense, that if he chose to have another relationship, that was his problem, not mine. He came up to me. We were in the kitchen, and he yelled in my face that I was a selfish person who never supported him. I told him to calm down, that the kids were upstairs, and then he slapped me, just like that, with his whole open hand against my face. I just stood there paralyzed, touching my cheek that was burning, and all I could think was, did this just happen? He looked surprised at himself for a second, but then he just said, "Don't provoke me," and went upstairs to the bedroom. That night I called a lawyer. I wasn't going to keep living like this. I wasn't going to expose my children to this toxicity, and I definitely wasn't going to normalize someone hitting me. The lawyer, a very professional woman like 50 years old, told me to document everything, to take photos of any marks, to save all text messages, basically to build a case. She asked me if I wanted to file a police report for the slap, and I told her I wasn't sure, that I just wanted to get out of the situation as quickly as possible. She explained to me that since we were married and had adopted children together, the divorce process could get complicated, especially if Andrew decided to fight for custody. While all this was happening, Andrew's relationship with Jessica started falling apart. Turns out she was super insecure and needed constant attention, and Andrew wasn't ready for that level of commitment. Like, he thought it was going to be this fun and exciting adventure, but it ended up being emotional work he didn't want to do. One day, I think it was like 2 months after the initial announcement, Andrew came home crying, literally with tears and everything, saying that Jessica had left him because he didn't want to move in with her immediately. I was like, and what do you want me to do with that information? But he kept going, said he made a mistake, that our family was the most important thing, that he wanted to try again. I told him very clearly, very calmly, that that wasn't going to happen. I told him that he made his choice, that he even hit me, and that there was no way I was going to trust him again. Andrew got angry again, said I was resentful, that I didn't know how to forgive, basically trying to make me feel guilty for not wanting to get back with someone who had betrayed and abused me. It was at that moment that I realized Andrew was never going to accept responsibility for anything. It was always going to be my fault, or someone else's, never his. The kids started asking more questions as the months went by. Lucas, in particular, was getting more observant. One day he asked me directly, "Are you guys getting divorced?" And I knew I couldn't keep lying, so I sat down with him and Caleb and explained to them in the simplest way possible that yes, that Papa, Andrew, and I were going to separate, but that we both loved them very much, and that none of this was their fault. Lucas nodded like he already knew, but Caleb started crying. It was horrible, seeing him like that, so confused and scared, and I could only hug him and tell him that everything was going to be okay, even though I wasn't sure if it was true. Andrew started being more and more negligent with the kids. But there was a day that he was supposed to pick them up from school because I had an important meeting, and he never showed up. The school called me like at 4 in the afternoon saying that Lucas and Caleb were still there, waiting, and I had to run out of my meeting to go get them. When I asked them if Papa Andrew had told them anything, Lucas said no, that he just didn't show up. I called Andrew like 10 times. He didn't answer until nighttime. And when he finally responded, he said he forgot, that he was busy working things out with Jessica. Apparently they were trying again. I told him that was unacceptable, that he couldn't just forget about his children. and he said I was exaggerating, that the kids were fine. It was after that incident that I decided I needed to move out. I couldn't keep living in the same house with someone so unpredictable. I needed a safe space for me and for the kids. I found a 3-bedroom apartment like 20 minutes from our current house. It wasn't huge, but it was enough, and I told Andrew that I was going to move out and that I was taking the kids. He said I couldn't do that legally the kids were both of ours, and that if I took them without his permission, there would be legal consequences. My lawyer explained to me that technically he was right, but that given the history of negligence and abuse we had documented, we had a strong case for primary custody. I moved on a Saturday morning with the help of Richard and 2 other friends from work. We packed all my stuff, the kids' stuff, and we left while Andrew was who knows where. I left a note telling him where we were and that my lawyer would contact him to establish a temporary custody agreement. The first few days in the new apartment were weird. The kids were quiet, like processing everything. But after a week or so, they started to relax. Lucas told me one night, "Dad, I feel calmer here." And that broke my heart and gave me hope at the same time, because it meant he had been feeling the tension all that time, but now he could breathe. Andrew didn't take the move well. He sent me messages constantly, sometimes angry, saying that I had brainwashed the kids, sometimes sad, saying he missed his family, sometimes threatening, saying he was going to take the kids away from me. But the one that surprised me the most was when he suddenly started bringing Jessica back into the equation. One day he showed up at my apartment without warning. We had agreed he would let me know before coming, with Jessica, wanting to officially introduce her to Lucas and Caleb. I told him it wasn't the time, that the kids had just gone through a huge change and didn't need more instability. But he insisted. I ended up letting them in because I didn't want to make a scene in front of the kids, and it was super awkward. Jessica tried to be friendly but was visibly nervous, and the kids barely talked to her. Lucas told me later that she asked him if he was excited that she and Papa Andrew were together, and he just said, "Not really," which, I'm not going to lie, gave me a bit of pride. After that disastrous visit, Andrew sent me a message saying he was going to fight for full custody, that I was unstable, that I had alienated the kids from him, that I was a horrible father. I showed it to my lawyer, and she basically said he had no case, that all the evidence was in my favor, but that we had to be prepared to go to court because he clearly wasn't going to let it go. The next few months were hell of legal preparation, gathering documents, making statements, getting testimonies from teachers and doctors about the kids' well-being. The custody hearing was in October. Almost 6 months after all, this started. We walked into that courtroom and it was like being in a movie. The judge sitting up front, our lawyers with their portfolios full of papers, Andrew on the other side of the room looking at me with this mix of rage and sadness. His lawyer tried to paint this picture of me as someone vindictive who was using the kids as a weapon, that I moved out without consulting, that I wasn't facilitating the relationship between Andrew and the kids. My lawyer presented the photos of my cheek after he hit me, the messages where he threatened me, the report from the school about the day he didn't pick up the kids, written testimonies from teachers saying the kids seemed happier and more stable since we moved. The judge listened to everything, asked Andrew some questions about the slapping incident. He tried to minimize it, saying it was a moment of frustration, asked about his relationship with Jessica and what stability he could offer. Andrew didn't have good answers, basically. Admitted that his personal life was a mess. Then the judge asked me about my long-term plans for the kids, how I was going to facilitate a relationship with Andrew. We said I was willing to make a reasonable visitation schedule, as long as Andrew demonstrated stability and respect, and if I considered the kids were safe with their father. I said honestly that I didn't feel comfortable with unsupervised visits given the recent history, but that I hoped that could change over time if Andrew worked on himself. The judge took a recess of like half an hour that felt eternal, and when he came back, he said that, after reviewing all the evidence, he was granting primary custody to me with a supervised visitation regime for Andrew until he could demonstrate stability for at least 6 months. He said it was clear that I had been the primary caregiver and that the kids were thriving under my care, and that while he valued the importance of both parents in the children's lives, the priority was their safety and well-being. Andrew looked devastated, literally put his head in his hands, and part of me felt sorry for him, but a bigger part felt pure relief. Supervised visits started like 2 weeks later. Andrew could see the kids twice a week for 2 hours at a visitation center where there were professional supervisors. The first few times were tense. He tried to talk badly about me to them, and the supervisors had to intervene, reminding him of the rules. But after a month or so, he started to relax and focus on really spending time with Lucas and Caleb. Apparently, Jessica ended up leaving him for real this time, like in November, and he had some kind of existential crisis that led him to therapy. His therapist had to write reports to the judge about his progress. Like 3 months after the initial hearing, Andrew sent me a long letter, handwritten, apologizing for everything. He said he realized how much damage he caused, that he was working on his control and manipulation issues, that he should never have hit me, that the kids deserved better. He didn't expect a response, he just wanted me to know he was sorry. I didn't respond to the letter, but I showed it to my lawyer, who said it was a good sign. Eventually, the judge allowed unsupervised visits, first for a few hours, then full weekends, and Andrew really made an effort to be better. I'm not saying I trust him completely. I probably never will, but at least the kids have some kind of relationship with him. Now we're in a more stable place. Lucas is in 7th grade, he's doing well, plays soccer, and has good friends. Caleb is in 6th. He's still the more sensitive one, but he's seeing a child therapist who's helping him process everything. I work, I cook, I take them to their activities, like I do the normal life of a single dad. There are days where it's exhausting, where I wonder if I made all the right decisions, where I miss having a partner even if it's just to divide the daily responsibilities. But then I see my kids laughing in the living room. Or Lucas helps me make dinner without me asking. Or Caleb hugs me before bed, and I know we're exactly where we need to be. 2 weeks ago, Andrew asked me if we could ever be friends again, and I told him honestly that I don't know. That maybe with time, but that for now we just need to focus on co-parenting the kids as best as possible. He seemed to understand. And that's enough for now, I guess.